so many people. And we have to understand that these stations overlap, as was discussed. If one unit is on call, it's going to affect the level of response time on another unit. And Station 1 covers a very large area now. Not only Station 2, but also now that 4 doesn't have a rescue, Station 1 is trying to cover that as well.
Councilor Winter.
Thank you, Mr. President. Chief, I understand your concerns, but just answer this one question. Are the residents of Kirtland going to get immediate response and care with your plan?
Mr. President, Councilor Winter, yes. Engine 2, if we're talking about ALS or paramedic level services, yes.
So would it be different? Is it different than if we got a rescue unit?
You would have an increase of redundancy in that area.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, sir.
Councilor Harris.
Thank you, Chief. One thing that you said to concern me, and I do think I agree with the notion of I'd rather not do it on overtime, but I also am a little bit skeptical that we couldn't find people and fill these positions. And what I mean by that is one thing, and I see the folks from the APOA up in the back have been sort of watching us, and one reason for arguing for higher compensation for the police versus the firefighters is that you really don't have any problem recruiting firefighters, do you?
Mr. President, Councilor Harris, no.
I mean, how many people apply for every spot in your class?
Mr. President, Councilor Harris, we typically get about 90 qualified applicants, and we're hiring probably about half of those every year. But if I could expand on the actual staffing, sure. It's harder to get the paramedic, though. Most people that come into the service don't come in as paramedics, something we have to train them for. Now, we do make a hiring preference. A paramedic does get a hiring preference in our system, right up there with gender and some diversity or ethnic backgrounds we're trying to recruit. But just so you know, the actual staffing needs, with the inclusion of Rescue 2, you need 163 paramedics. And I'm projecting by about July of 14, when the next paramedic class graduates, based on future promotions and projected retirements, we're going to be at about 140, so we're going to be down about 23 paramedics. So there will be paramedic overtime every day in order to staff that unit. That's my major concern because of the retirement projections and the promotions that are likely to occur because of the retirements.
But aren't there creative ways to handle that, either through sending people to CNM or having like a double class? I mean, you could do a double class of paramedics. There are firefighters who could fill those classes, correct?
Mr. Lewis, Mr. President, Councilor Harris, the infrastructure limits us to about 15 to 20.
But the infrastructure is human beings. It's instructors.
It is, sir. Okay. We could bring in more instructional staff. There's going to be some costs added to that. And I do believe that more and more people will be interested in going to paramedic school with the expansion of ALS. But again, it's something you have to plan for and get them through the training before you can actually use them on a unit. It should be noted too that when you send somebody to paramedic school, they're not on their primary assignment, which is typically a suppression unit out in the field. So that has to be backfilled as well. And that's where I'm getting at with the infrastructure and some of the budget limitations. The legislation did not provide for the costs associated for a expansion paramedic class.
Okay. Yeah, I wish that there was a kind of a way that could be accommodated either in this legislation or, because I would prefer that we not do this with overtime. I don't like that idea, but I don't know. But I also don't like the resistance I'm hearing from, usually division directors, when they come up here and you say, well, we'd really like to give you more money to expand the service, they're usually pretty happy to hear that. And there seems to be some resistance, which I don't think you're working creatively hard enough to get around, which is the infrastructure of actually hiring more people, because I think you can figure out how to do that. And I wish that you'd come up with that plan, because I'm kind of stuck right now. Anyway, that's just a comment.
Councilor Myers.
I guess since I don't have to be politically correct, I guess it does strike me as odd, as Councilor Harris said. I would never presume any of us up here would be as good of a police chief as you are. And so that's why I would caution us to pretend we could walk a mile in your shoes. I mean, it may be different that we have in other departments, but you all have been lauded nationally. And so that's why I guess I'm not understanding, again, why would we be proposing something that clearly the chief of the fire department is concerned is not to in his opinion, is the way he would proceed. And it's almost like cutting the legs off of your very best supervisors. I would just caution us before we do that. He has written up 9 reasons, and again, of why this doesn't make sense to him. And it seems to me like he, if anyone, lives and breathes safety. He would never, knowing him for the brief time I've known him, ever put anyone at risk unduly. He would always look to use our funds to the highest and best use. And so I'm at a loss as to why we have this, other than it's maybe pushed by the unions. I don't know. It seems like it came up at an odd time, right around the election. I cannot figure out why a chief that is lauded nationally, and we've got great records, would not be supporting this. So that just makes me take heed, because I do want the best for Kirtland. I want the best for the entire city. So let me ask one more question after that ramble. If this is approved, you're thinking you're still going to do add the apparatus in 2 weeks, and then this would be in addition to that. We would get a separate vehicle that would, and again, these transports are used, what's the ratio amount of time?
Mr. President, Councilor Myers, Albuquerque Fire has a 2-tiered, if I may explain, ma'am.
Sure.
Albuquerque Fire and most fire departments use a 2-tiered emergency response system where the firefighter, EMT, paramedics respond first, and then the transport is conducted under contract with a ambulance transport company, and which we do here. Last year we ran a little over 69,000 EMS calls, and of that we transported about 150 times.
And so what is that ratio? Oh.
It's a 0.2%.
0.2%.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So,
Mr. President,
Councilman,
I move to call the question.
motion to call the question. Motion is second to call the question. Those in favor say yes. Yes. Motion to call the question. Those in favor say yes and raise your hand. Yes. Those opposed, no. No. Any other questions and discussion on the bill? Councilor Arnold Jones.
Sorry, Chief. I want to go back to buying a piece of equipment, which is what we're asking here, and integrating it with your current plan. And I am struggling to understand if we are saying that that equipment will be a waste of money because the equipment will be out of date by the time you actually receive it.
Mr. President, Councilor Arnold Jones, there is a measurable benefit for putting a rescue there. However, the system will be going through a redesign by the time the staffing is available, and that's just the truth of the matter. And just so I'm clear of how it would fit in, if approved, with the ALS expansion project, eventually the 2 medics that are assigned to that unit, one would eventually go to the engine, and this is going to occur within the next 18 months. One would go to the engine, one would stay on the rescue, and you would end up with 1 paramedic on the engine, 1 paramedic on the rescue. That's eventually what the plan, how it would evolve. If
So
that answers your question.
well,